Hey guys, welcome to our YouTube channel FinTechs. Today we will talk about the Donald Trump's new tariff policy. Are you still looking to understand how President Donald Trump's tariff policies will affect your daily life? Well, here is a brief overview. President Donald Trump's new tariffs on imports from countries like Canada, Mexico, and China are expected to have significant economic repercussions for American consumers. Here's a breakdown of the potential impacts. Higher prices for consumer goods. Tariffs act as a tax on imported goods, and the additional costs are often passed on to consumers. For example, a 25% tariff on imported cars could increase their prices by approximately $3,000. Everyday items such as clothing, toys, electronics, and household appliances are likely to become more expensive, particularly those imported from China, which supplies a large portion of these goods. Increased costs for essential goods. Food prices may rise due to tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, which are major suppliers of vegetables and prepared foods. Prescription drugs and medical supplies could also see price hikes, making healthcare more expensive for many Americans. Impact on inflation and disposable income. Economists estimate that the tariffs could increase inflation and reduce the disposable income of the average American household by up to $2,000 annually. Middle-income families could lose between $1,700 to $3,900 per year due to higher prices. Energy costs. Although direct tariffs are not placed on oil, the side effects of these policies could lead to higher gas prices, particularly if global oil prices rise. Economic growth and consumer confidence. The tariffs could weaken economic growth by disrupting supply chains and increasing production costs for domestic manufacturers. Consumer confidence may erode further as households face higher costs for essential goods and services. In summary, while the tariffs aim to protect U.S. industries and reduce trade imbalances, they are likely to result in higher prices for a wide range of products, increase inflation, and reduce disposable income for America. Now, let's listen to what our experts have to say about the long-term and short-term effects of this policy on consumers.
All right. Welcome in, everyone, to this deep dive where today we're tackling a pretty complex but really important topic, the economic effects of those tariffs on imports that have been making headlines. You know, those ones on goods coming from places like Canada, Mexico, even China.
Yeah, those are the ones. It's a bit of a tangled web, really, because we're going to be looking at both the short-term and long-term impacts. We're talking about potential price changes, what you're going to be seeing at the store, but also bigger economic shifts that could impact your wallet down the road.
Right, exactly. And I mean, we've all seen those headlines about trade wars and tariffs, but it can be hard to figure out how it all actually connects to our own lives, our own spending.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of this deep dive, right? We're trying to cut through the noise and figure out how these policies might be hitting your pocketbook, both in the short term and further down the line.
Perfect. So let's jump right in. First things first, in the immediate future, what are some of the ways these tariffs might be showing up in our everyday lives?
Well, I think the most direct impact you're going to see is prices going up on a lot of the things you buy, particularly imported goods. Think about it. A tariff is basically a tax on those imports, and a lot of times those costs get passed down to the consumer, meaning you.
So, give me an example. What kinds of price increases are we talking about here?
Well, let's say you're thinking about buying a new car, and that car happens to be imported. We're talking about a potential price increase of a few $1,000s, easy, like a 25% tariff on a car. That could tack on an extra, let's say, $3,000 to the price tag.
Oof, yeah, that's a pretty big hit to the wallet. And I imagine it's not just big-ticket items like cars, right? What about everyday stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Think about all the things you buy regularly. Clothes, toys for the kids, electronics, those appliances around the house. Many of those products, especially if they're coming from China, could see price increases because of these tariffs.
So we're talking about basically everything from, a new TV to a new washing machine potentially costing more.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's not just the fun stuff. Things like groceries could be impacted too. Think about fresh produce or prepared foods. If those are coming from Canada or Mexico, those prices might go up as well.
Man, so Basically, your weekly grocery bill is potentially going up, maybe even your prescriptions, right? I mean, I know some medications and medical supplies are imported as well.
You got it. And that's where it starts to get really concerning, right? Because when the prices of essential goods start to rise, it eats into your budget and leaves less money for everything else.
Right, exactly. And I know you've been looking into the potential impact on inflation. What are economists saying about that?
Well, the consensus seems to be that these tariffs could lead to a noticeable uptick in inflation. That means your dollar just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. And when we're talking about the average American household, you could be looking at a potential loss of a couple $1,000 a year in disposable income.
Wow, that's a significant amount. And I imagine some families are going to feel that impact even more than others, right?
Yeah, for sure. Middle-income families, especially those with kids, they could be hit the hardest. Some estimates suggest they might lose somewhere between $1,700 and almost $4,000 per year. That's a huge chunk of change.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's just the direct effects we're talking about. Are there any indirect ways these tariffs might impact our wallets?
Well, even though things like oil and gas aren't directly targeted by these tariffs, the ripple effects of a changing global economy can be unpredictable.
Yeah.
You can see those global energy prices fluctuate, which could potentially lead to higher prices at the pump.
Oh, man. So it's like even filling up your gas tank could become more expensive as a side effect of all this.
It's definitely a possibility, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about those short-term kind of immediate impacts. But what about the long game here? What are the potential long-term consequences of these tariffs on the broader economy?
Yeah, so in the long term, these tariffs could potentially put the brakes on economic growth. It all comes down to something called supply chains.
Supply chains.
Right, yeah. So think of it like a giant, complicated web. Businesses rely on these intricate networks to get the materials they need, manufacture their products, and then get those products to consumers. And when tariffs make those imported components more expensive, it throws a wrench in the whole system.
I see. So it's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Costs go up for manufacturers, which can lead to them either raising prices on their products or maybe even cutting back on production. And that can lead to slower economic growth overall.
And how might that impact us, beyond just those price increases?
Well, it can impact how confident people feel about the economy as a whole. If you're constantly shelling out more cash for everyday necessities and seeing businesses struggle, you might start feeling less optimistic about the future.
That makes sense. If you're worried about the economy, you're probably going to be more hesitant to spend money, right?
Right. And that can lead to a slowdown in economic activity, making things even tougher for businesses and ultimately impacting everyone.
So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it can be. And it all circles back to those goals behind the tariffs in the first place. The idea is often to protect American industries and reduce those trade imbalances.
Right, right. But based on what we've discussed, do those intended outcomes seem likely, or are there some unintended consequences we need to be aware of?
Well, while the goal might be to boost certain industries here in the U.S., the reality is that those higher prices we talked about, that increased inflation eating away at your purchasing power, and the potential for slower economic growth, those are pretty significant downsides to consider.
So it seems like, while there might be some benefits for certain industries, the average consumer could end up bearing the brunt of the costs.
That's certainly a possibility, and it's something we all need to be aware of.
Absolutely. All right, so to wrap things up here, it seems like the most immediate impact we're all likely to see is higher prices on a whole bunch of stuff. And looking ahead, there's the potential for inflation to heat up and the economy to slow down. So as we go about our lives, making those everyday decisions about spending and planning for the future, it's important to keep all of these potential ripple effects in mind. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.